Hey everyone, Brian here. Thanks for joining me out in the resort garden, where for many of these plants this is the last resort, given that there's not space elsewhere for them in the garden. This is also my permaculture test laboratory, where I experiment with permaculture practices, and we're looking at this newly created hugelbed. In previous videos I was purposefully general with the permaculture information. In this video, I'll get a little bit more technical, and the information can be a little bit dry, maybe drier than the dirt that's here. But if you stick through to the end, I'll show you something really cool. This is a bed of red winter kale, some French filet beans, the Triomphe de Farcy variety, and underneath are some arugula plants. This yard has a lot of dirt, but little soil, and most of the garden plants thrive off of good soil. The idea is to use permaculture to create the soil that's needed by other plants. The beans will add nitrogen to the soil, as well as provide the groundwork with its roots for organisms to begin living in. The kale is a good soil building plant I've discovered. It's fast growing and it attracts caterpillars. This cabbage worm is making its home in the kale, and normally we don't want that, but today he's a welcome pal because he's going to munch on the kale and turn it into caterpillar manure. And once it drops on the ground, it'll start becoming soil. In addition to being a permaculture laboratory, this area is also a playground. The challenge here is to try to solve problems with just things from around the house or the yard. With the topography here, namely it being a slope, it presents some pretty interesting challenges. Here I've used some compacted clay to help with erosion. One part is a dam and the other part is shoring up the lower end. So down here, let's look at some of the plants that we saw in the previous episodes, like that nasturtium that has now dried up. We have the oregano and the thyme. The installation of the AC condenser resulted in a lot of change in this area. Part of the swell was removed, and we have a lot of compacted clay that was dug up from trenching lines for the AC condenser. We have the daikon here that has set seed and is beginning to dry out. In terms of permaculture, daikon is one of the more popular plants to use for conditioning soil and also for breaking up soil. It's got a long taproot, and what's nice about them is they'll go deep into the ground, and depending on how compacted the soil is, they will grow to their corresponding width. And what happens is when they die and they dry out, the soil that they push away becomes a little hole. So that's how they break up the soil. Here is the Triomphe de Farcy bean with its variegated skin. I wanted to pick it and let you see its skin, but let's go ahead and plant. Let's pull out the daikon and plant some Triomphe de Farcy plants in their place. But ideally you can leave the daikon in its place and let the decomposition process happen. Also the soil decompaction happen. Is that a word? Decompaction? Here are some string beans, and they're grown here. This is dirt. So beans, they can grow in pretty much anywhere. The bean production will be dependent on soil quality, but we're not really interested in bean production, more into soil improvement. This is a dragon fruit, and coming up this way are some of the plants that was sown earlier than year, and they haven't been growing to the size that I had expected. They're very stunted. On the one hand, it shouldn't be a surprise because like I said before, this is mostly dirt. And back here is a faux tea plant. It's a Chinese medicinal plant with a lot of interesting lore. The professor who was consuming this supposedly lived to 200 years, so that's a very interesting lore. Some plants I grow based off of their tall tails, so that's one of them. These are some of the basil plants. This is a Brussels sprout. It's pretty much cabbage worm city. And here's more of the foti. This is the marigold. It's done flowering, it's making seed. That is a collard green, also cabbage worm city. Coming along this way is another dragon fruit cactus. It's made a lot of growth this year. Look how long it's going. It's reaching all the way and making new plants. One of the newer uses for this dragon fruit that I've read recently is that people have been using it as a water purification plant. Back this way is a bed of gynara and merijam. The merijam are flowering along with the wild zatar. And here's the gynara. It's also called a diabetes plant. It's a nice medicinal plant, and I like growing medicinal plants even though I don't use them. This is the Greek oregano. It hasn't expanded as much as I thought it would. This is a bed of saffron crocus. They're not going to pop out until December. I'm checking the soil, making sure it's still nice and loose for it. These are a couple of daylily. They're hanging on, and I like to help them along, but I don't have time to attend to them. So hopefully they'll hang on until I can tend to them. Back this way, this is a gladiolus, and this bed here is a bed of gladiolus, but now it's being planted with other things. Here's an example of letting nature run its course. This was a compacted piece of clay, and in California, when you dig down deep enough, you'll get a bunch of them, and you'll see that later. You saw that earlier, but you'll get a bunch of them. They're hard to use because they're like rocks. If you leave them out, they'll eventually break down, and you can use them as soil. This is a California cowpea, California number 5 cowpea, and we have a couple of seeds. This is what a cowpea looks like. It's also known as a black-eyed bean. Surprisingly, they are having trouble growing. I have a couple seeds, so maybe the subsequent growing will be better. Maybe they've acclimated to this climate. This is the Himo togarashi, and once again, togarashi is Japanese for chili pepper. Got one of two growing here. It's a very interesting plant. Up here, surprisingly, the sunchoke is not doing very well at all. It's dried up. I thought it would grow like a weed, and I was actually afraid that it would spread all over, but maybe it'll come back. It's a tuber. There's a tuber underneath, so maybe it'll come back. The garlic chive here, they grow like weeds, so it's also a surprise to find that they're not doing very well. The napole, on the other hand, it's going to do well. It probably grows in anything. And it's made a new pad, so very cool to find. Coming back down this way, we'll see the rest of this area. And backing up some more, here's the AC condenser that was installed. And down below are the pipes that run into the house. So when they trenched it, we brought up a lot of soil from underneath, and we got compacted clay. And now they're all up here. And I'm not a geologist, but I think it's good to bring this up. There might be lots of minerals that plants don't normally access. So we brought this up, and I place it and use it as a border material, but over time, with exposure to the weather, it will begin to crumble and turn into soil or clay that will make up the soil, and more importantly, might have unlocked some of the minerals that the plants would never have been able to reach because their roots don't go that low. This is the other side of the space. This is where the pipes were installed and run, and now we have a little bit of a unsightly mess. So my plan is to maybe plant this hydrangea in front and cover the pipes. And this hydrangea I've had for a few years now. I got that on clearance, and I've nursed it back to health. This is the Camilla. It was actually 2 feet to the right. They dug it out, and for the course of the construction, which was about 4 days, I had it in a tub of water, so I'm hoping it'll come back. That is a pallet from the furnace. I also have a pallet from the condenser, and my plan is to hide the pipes here using the pallet. So maybe I'll grow some succulents along the pallet. It may take some time. I haven't really thought about how to do that. I'll be sure to update you guys once I figure something out. Here's a quick tangent. These are the elephant garlic that was harvested from the front yard. And if you saw the front yard permaculture video, this is in reference to that. Very interesting this year, not too many bulbils on them. If you saw my last year's harvest, you'll notice I got a lot of bulbils. Now back to the resort garden. So one of the challenges of working on slope is irrigation. When I water, all the water will just run down, and it doesn't help when the dragon fruit acts as a gutter and channels all my water away. So I've cut a piece off, and now it'll channel into the bed. Otherwise, it was running all down this way. Speaking of down this way, we have Sheldon the tortoise, whom you probably heard me talk about in my other videos about him eating, or the fear of him eating, my plants. His favorite thing to eat is dragon fruit cactus. I discovered that he can handle the thorns and all after he knocked down a pot with red dragon fruit cactus in it. He's a sulcata tortoise, also known as a spur-thigh tortoise. You can see the spurs on his arms. They grow pretty big, and they're actually the world's 3rd largest tortoise species. When they're sold, they're usually sold as babies, and when I got him, he was not more than a tennis ball size. I'm sticking my hand in there for reference. They get big, and they can become a nuisance. They'll dig up your yard, they'll push things out of the way. So just keep that in mind if you're ever interested in getting a tortoise like this. And with Sheldon crunching along, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.